On today's episode, we're talking about the Nvidia Shield Pro versus Apple TV 4K. Everyone loves that one. Whether Dolby Vision Filmmaker mode is actually better than Dolby Vision Dark on TCL TV so far, why standard definition content can look pretty rough on modern 4K TVs, how to dial in an Nvidia Shield with an LG C4 for smoother sports and streaming, whether IMAX mode on the Hisense U8N actually matters, and what's going on with Panasonic TVs in the US. Welcome back to Just Ask Caleb, everyone. I am the Caleb you just ask. You have tech questions and I have tech answers. If you have a question for me, please email it. Don't send it any other way, please. Please email it to askcaleb@CalebRated.com, and we'll see if your question gets picked to be answered on the show. Remember, you don't have to be a member to have your questions featured on the show, but members do get priority answers from me personally. Just put member in the subject line. Before we get started, and parents, maybe cover your kids' ears before you decide whether they get to see this part, can we just be real for a second? Real Caleb coming at you. I'm tired. Now, to the few of you who feel the need to say, Caleb looks tired in this one, in the comment section, first off, stop acting like I'm not right there reading that message. At least address it to me, okay? Second off, nah, man, I am so caffeinated in those videos. Bitch, I've had like this much coffee and a Red Bull by the time I sit down in this seat. You know what? I'm gonna have another one right now. Not sponsored, but I should be. Red Bull, you watching? That is tasty. Anyway, today I actually am tired. You wanna know why? I'm not sleeping much because I have a mass the size of a grapefruit in my stomach. Let me repeat that. A mass the size of a grapefruit in my stomach. Am I oversharing? I don't care. Don't worry, no, it isn't cancer and I'll be fine. But I'm on a liquid diet for like 3 weeks. And have you ever been on a liquid diet? Do not hop in the comments and act like you liked it, because actually doing it is worse than it sounds, please believe. So just for some perspective here, the next time you get frustrated that your soundbar isn't doing DTS for some inexplicable reason and you're in a twist about it, just remember, you can have a pizza or fried chicken that night if you want to. That is a privilege not all of us get to enjoy all the time. And yes, I'm aware cancer would be worse, and now I feel like we should donate to the cancer charity of our choice. Because cancer. Okay, I'm done now. You can bring the kids back into the room. Just wanted to let you know where I'm coming from today and that I love you for being here. I really, really do. Ooh, and as long as I'm expressing gratitude, one more thing before we get started on the questions. I wanted to give a shout out to Beardy's wife, as well as anyone else's partner who has to deal with hearing my voice in their home 2 to 3 times a week. Beardy, whose question I answered in last week's show, told me a fun story. Anyway, thank you, Beardy's wife, for supporting your partner in their AV obsession. And for those of you couples and families who watch me, that's just a huge honor and a big reason why I try to keep this channel clean, because I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I wanna make some really inappropriate jokes. Y'all keep me honest, and I appreciate that. Most of the time. I'll be sure to tell you to cover your kids' ears like I just did, because sometimes I just can't resist. Okay, finally, to the questions. The first question is about the Nvidia Shield Pro versus Apple TV 4K. Viewer Christian writes, hi Caleb, I've been going back and forth between buying an Apple TV 4K and the Nvidia Shield Pro. I mainly stream Netflix, YouTube, Plex, and sports, but I also care a lot about picture quality and smoothness. I keep hearing people say the Shield is still king because of AI upscaling, but others say the Apple TV is faster and more stable. Which one would you buy today for general use on a modern OLED TV? Thanks. Okay, Christian, you know you opened a can of worms, right? This is one of these questions where the internet gets super uptight because people start answering for themselves instead of for normal people. And real quick, I'll answer for myself. I would buy the Apple TV. But anyway, I say that as somebody who genuinely likes the Nvidia Shield TV Pro. The Shield is still awesome for a certain kind of user. The problem is that the Shield has slowly become a power user box, while the Apple TV 4K has become a just works box. And so for most viewers, just works matters a lot more than being able to decode some insane remux from a private Plex server encoded in a format invented by cave goblins in 2017. Oh, and by the way, the Shield's AI upscaling was surpassed by high-end TVs a long time ago. So a modern OLED TV will crush the Shield's upscaling easily. Now, if you're a hardcore home theater nerd with local media libraries, unusual codecs, advanced audio needs, Plex, Jellyfin, Kodi, workflows, network attached storage, tinkering tendencies, side-loaded apps, emulator interests, or niche playback demands, the Shield still has real advantages. But if you're a normal human being who mostly streams Netflix, Disney+, Max, YouTube, Apple TV+, Prime Video, and stuff like that, I honestly think the Apple TV 4K is the move. The Apple TV 4K's frame rate and dynamic range matching are still the most killer features for me, and probably the answer to your concern about smoothness. You can have it match the original frame rate if you want true cinematic playback, or you can force everything into a 60 Hertz container if you prefer smoother navigation and don't want to deal with HDMI resyncs every 5 seconds. Same with HDR. You can match content exactly, or you can force Dolby Vision output all the time, even if some of that Dolby Vision is basically Dolby Vision-ish, because it's put on SDR content. Now, do purists hate that? Oh yeah, absolutely. But some TVs genuinely look really good that way because their Dolby Vision tone mapping pipeline is excellent. So, I totally understand why some people said it once and never think about it again. Meanwhile, the Shield still wins in some enthusiast scenarios, especially if you have a gigantic NAS full of untouched Blu-ray rips. Those are the kinds with true HD Atmos audio, weird codec containers, local Plex servers, Kodi setups, or you just enjoy tinkering with stuff because you're a beautiful little chaos goblin. I mean, the Shield is still powerful. It can still direct play files that would make lesser streamers burst into flames. But for most people just want to sit down, click a button, and watch Andor without troubleshooting an audio handshake issue like they're working IT support for a regional hospital. So that's why the Apple TV wins for me right now. It's the least annoying and the most consistent. And by the way, also doesn't have much in the way of ads. Don Price writes in saying, "Hi Caleb, I noticed after a recent firmware update on my TCL TV that Dolby Vision Dark seems to have been replaced by Dolby Vision Filmmaker mode. Is Filmmaker mode supposed to replace Dolby Vision Dark entirely? And should I actually be using it instead? Thanks, Don." I'm glad you brought this one up, Don, because I think a lot of newer TCL owners out there who bother to change their picture presets may be wondering the same thing. I wish I had included this in the short that I did about this last week. So first, yes, Dolby Filmmaker mode, if it is added via update, might replace Dolby Vision Dark on most TVs, and it definitely has on TCL TVs. The reason Dolby Filmmaker mode exists is because Dolby Vision Dark had a PR problem. Folks just thought Dolby Vision was dark and that setting was undesirable. And two, brands started taking some liberties with Dolby Vision Dark, and I don't blame them because nothing about the word dark says creator's intent. You know what I mean? Dolby Filmmaker mode tries to make Dolby's version of HDR feel accurate, like Filmmaker mode does for HDR and SDR on other TVs that support it. It disables all the extra junk and presents the picture with as little alteration as possible. Whether you like that is up to you. You can also use Dolby Vision Bright and disable the motion smoothing if you want. I do that a lot. Or you can use Dolby Vision IQ and disable motion smoothing if you don't like it. And that will also adjust the brightness, gamma, and color temp depending on your room environment. I never use Dolby Vision IQ for what it's worth, but that's just me. Viewer Jim Priz asks, "Hi Caleb, I've noticed that older SD cable channels and DVDs actually look worse on my new 4K TV than they did on my old plasma. Is that normal, or is there something wrong with my settings? Thanks, Jim." Hey Jim, so first off, your experience is normal for anybody who's recently upgraded to a 4K TV, but especially for somebody who upgrades from a plasma. So please know that there are thousands of people who have gone through this experience. The answer is just a tiny bit complicated, but I'm gonna walk you through it. First, your 4K TV came with an Eco or Standard Picture preset mode on by default, and that also includes motion smoothing, the cause of soap opera effect. You aren't used to that with your plasma, so I would turn that particular setting off completely, or at least reduce the motion settings to their absolute minimum, like 1 or 2 on de-judder and de-blur settings. That's going to give the TV's processor less to do, which will help it with upscaling, which I'll get to in a moment. Second, your plasma was probably a 1080p TV, which is much closer to the 720p or 480p signals that were coming to it. So it had a lot less work to do to upscale those images to fill up all of its pixels, because it had many fewer pixels than your brand new TV. Which brings me to my third point. You have a lot more pixels now, and they all have to be filled up. So going from 720p, heck, even coming up from 1080p to 4K or 2160p is a tough job for a TV's processor to handle, because there's so much less information than the TV's pixels demand. Also, the larger the screen gets, the more obvious those cable channels and DVD limitations are gonna look. I mean, I'm over here playing with a Laserdisc player on a 140-inch projection screen and thinking, dang, I never knew it was that bad. So if your cable company offers a premium tier, I would get it. Some of your channels probably look better than others. If they have a streaming version of their service, I would actually try that, maybe get away from the cable box entirely. It could end up being better quality than the highly compressed stuff that they are jamming down the cable that not only carries your TV, but also the internet for at least half of your neighborhood. And if you still like to use discs, get the Blu-ray version or 4K version of your favorite movies. Don't go broke, start with your favorites, or subscribe to streaming services that present them in 4K and maybe even HDR. Those will all look better than your DVDs. You just won't own them technically. Viewer Vikesh writes, "Hi Caleb, I recently bought an LG C4 OLED along with an Nvidia Shield Pro." Feels like we just talked about this. I watch a lot of 1080p sports streams and international content that runs at 25 FPS and 50 FPS. I'm trying to figure out the best settings between the Shield and the TV itself for motion and upscaling. Should I let the Shield upscale, or should I let the LG handle it? And what motion settings would you recommend for smoother playback without making everything look weird? Thanks for all the great content. So Vikesh, I'm gonna have to change my answer like midstream here, but you can experiment with this if you want to. But I personally would turn off the upscaling in the Shield Pro and let your LG OLED handle it. It's gonna do a much better upscaling job. Second, I would try turning motion settings on just a little bit, like 1 or 2 clicks for de-judder and de-blur, and see how that works for you. If you need more, you can add more, but you may get ghosting, because if you watch a lot of football, soccer for us Yanks, or other fast-moving sports in your area, that motion smoothing can cause other motion problems that you don't want for sports. Now, you mentioned 25 and 50 FPS, and I wonder how that's converting over for you. Maybe the Shield does something like that? I mean, that's probably PAL format as well instead of CCAM. So, do I have that the other way around? Anyway, I would also note that OLED has nearly instant pixel response time, so bright objects will appear to flash during slow pans. That's just part of the deal. Don't expect the motion smoothing and de-judder to get rid of that entirely. Anyway, Vikesh, that's a slightly complicated issue. I'm gonna find your original email and email you back once I've done a little bit more research. Art writes, "Hi Caleb, I own a Hisense U8N and I noticed there's an IMAX mode available for some Disney Plus content, but honestly, I never use it because I'm not really sure what it's doing. Does IMAX mode actually improve the picture, or is it mostly marketing?" Thanks, Art. Actually, it's amazing that you're getting IMAX on Disney Plus, because that was broken for a long time and just recently got fixed on TCL TV. So maybe that's not so weird that you got it on your Hisense. Anyway, Art, I'm not gonna say it's mostly marketing, but IMAX is trying to cash in on something Dolby did a long time ago, if you ask me. And I've noticed almost zero difference between Filmmaker mode and IMAX mode, or Dolby Vision Filmmaker mode and IMAX mode. Sometimes, rarely, IMAX does some extra stuff, like it boosts the brightness a little, changes tone mapping behavior, maybe sharpens the image slightly, or adjusts the gamma and EOTF tracking. Maybe it pushes color just a little bit differently, Or this is the one I think is important. Maybe it changes aspect ratio handling for IMAX expanded scenes. That last one is the only one I really care about. Well, that and DTS being the default audio mode more often than not. But mostly, folks are not gonna see or hear a difference. Last one, I had to put this in because it just seems really important right now. Viewer Paul asks, "Hi Caleb, I noticed you haven't really talked much about Panasonic TVs lately. Do they still even sell TVs in the US? And if not, what happened there?" Paul, yeah, the answer to the first part of your question is that they haven't been in touch. And I'm worried that it's because they may be backing out of the US after all, or they're trying to out Sony and bring their stuff out later when more folks are likely to notice or pay attention. They don't want to compete with everyone else. Panasonic was out of the US for years, 10 years I think, and then they came back for like 2 years, and now we just don't know. But trust me, the moment I know one way or the other, I will be letting you guys know. And that, my friends, wraps this batch of questions, maybe the longest version of this show we've ever done. Thanks to our viewers for writing in. If you've got a home theater puzzle that you'd like me to tackle, drop me an email, askcaleb@CalebRated.com. I'll keep scouting the best questions and we'll talk about them right here on this show on Saturdays. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends if you can. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, take care of yourself. There are so many questions.